Hey guys, and welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about the Big Ten Conference preview and predictions for the men's college basketball 2016-2017 season. And if you want more of these conference preview videos in the coming days, you can subscribe to the channel to get the notifications for those. And also, once college basketball season rolls around, I'm going to be releasing daily videos for what I think are some of the better value bets on the board against the spread. And also, I release weekly college football pick videos that you can also see on my channel. And then, again, just subscribe to get notifications of when I release those videos. And if you want more pick content just beyond what I do in these videos, you can head over to stumpthespread.com and you can register a free or premium account there with no strings attached. And I will link Stump the Spread in the description of this video so you can find that. Alright, so heading into the meat of this video, we're going to be going through the standing projections for each Big Ten team starting at 14 and going all the way up to number 1 overall. And we're just going to kind of be doing a overview and preview of the team as we show where they are in the list. So starting at number 14, we have the Rutgers Scarlet Knights. Rutgers is coming off another poor campaign, going just 7-25 overall and 1-17 in the Big Ten last year, and this group is going to be returning 3 starters. Rutgers really took a big step back last year, going from 182nd in the RPI the year prior to 293rd, which is just absurdly low for a team that's in a Power 5 conference. Rutgers is happy to return 2 of their better players with sophomore Corey Sanders, who averaged nearly 16 points per game, and junior Mike Williams, who averaged about 12 points per game this past year. Rutgers was really poor on the defensive side of the ball last year, and as a result, Rutgers has changed their head coach, and Steve Picciel is coming over from Stony Brook, and he's really going to try to enforce the importance of the defensive side of the ball and not just try to outscore everyone the Scarlet Knights play. Injuries also played a role with Rutgers' struggles last year, but if this group is able to remain healthier, then we do expect this squad to win more than one Big Ten conference game this year, especially with some other Big Ten teams that are projected to be in the bottom of the standings that the Scarlet Knights should be able to compete against. At number 13 on the list, we have the Nebraska Cornhuskers. Nebraska didn't quite live up to their expectations last year, going 16-18 overall, as well as 6-12 in the Big Ten, but Nebraska was able to pick up some pretty impressive wins in conference play, getting by Michigan State and Wisconsin, but the Cornhuskers were inconsistent and also struggled in many of their competitive close games down the stretch. Nebraska does return just 2 starters this year, and this squad is definitely hurt by the fact that Siobhan Shields has moved on, and then the team was also surprised with the transfer of Andrew White, who decided to play his last year at Syracuse as a graduate transfer. Nebraska will look to build around some of their veterans like Ty Webster, Glenn Watson Jr., and Michael Jacobson. This squad is also happy to get Anton Gill, who had to sit out this past year after transferring over from Louisville. Nebraska has been floating around the 150 RPI ranking over the last 2 seasons by year's end, and this is probably around where this group might finish this year, or maybe even lower, just based on the fact that the Huskers did lose 2 of their top players from last year's squad. Nebraska really lacks the depth and elite players that are needed to compete in the mid to upper tier of the Big Ten Conference. Heading in at number 12 on the list, we have the Minnesota Golden Gophers. Minnesota was an absolute mess last year, going 8-23 overall and just 2-16 in the Big Ten. This squad does return 3 starters, and last year Minnesota finished the year ranked 264th in the RPI, which is over 150 spots lower than they finished the year prior. Minnesota will lead on guys like Nate Mason and Jordan Murphy, who both averaged in double figures last year. Head coach Pitino's team really lacks the experience needed to compete in the upper part of the Big Ten, and this squad is definitely going to be going through some growing pains as they only have a few upperclassmen to really lean on this coming season. We'll be keeping an eye on freshmen like Coffey, Hurt, and Curry as they try to earn more playing time in this Minnesota lineup. At number 11 on the list, we have the Iowa Hawkeyes. Iowa put together a pretty strong campaign last year, going 22-11 overall, as well as 12-6 in the Big Ten, which earned them a tie for 3rd place in the conference. Iowa finished the year ranked 26th in the RPI and lost in the NCAA second round. This group does return just one starter, and after having so much veteran experience last year, this is really going to be more of a rebuilding year for Iowa as they get younger guys on the team more playing time. Iowa will be hitching their ride to the 6'6" senior shooting guard Peter Jock, who averaged over 16 points per game last year. With Jock's return, this gives Iowa a fighting chance at making their fourth straight NCAA appearance, but given the amount of newcomers that are going to be on this squad and the lack of continuity out of the gate, we expect Iowa to finish in the lower half of the Big Ten and miss out on making the big dance. At number 10 on the list, we have Northwestern. Northwestern was an under-the-radar team in the Big Ten last year, actually having a pretty respectable campaign, going 20-12 overall, as well as 8-10 in the conference, and with a number of close defeats coming in conference play, with maybe 2 or 3 extra wins in games that Northwestern lost by 5 points or less. They could have potentially had the kind of resume needed to be a bubble team, or perhaps sliding into the NCAA tournament. Head coach Collins will be leaning on some of his first recruits that he had at Northwestern with Brian McIntosh, Vic Law, and Scotty Lindsey, as well as power forward Gavin Skelly. Northwestern boasts one of the better backcourts in the Big Ten, and with a lot of important key players returning, we think that Northwestern could perhaps take a step forward in the conference this year and finish even higher than the 10th place that we have them currently ranked. At number 9 on the list, we have the Penn State Nittany Lions. Penn State was a thorn in a lot of teams' side last year in the Big Ten, as this group went just 16-16 overall, but a respectable 7-11 in conference play. The Nittany Lions returned 3 starters from a team that finished last year ranked 121st in the RPI. Penn State brings on a lot of intriguing freshman talent this year, and it's going to be really intriguing to see how these guys are able to work their way into the mix. Penn State does return junior point guard Shep Gardner, who had a really strong campaign last year, averaging nearly 15 points per game. Penn State is going through a brutal non-conference schedule, but perhaps this experience will bolster this team and strengthen them before heading into Big Ten play, where they could be even better than the 7-11 mark that they had last year in the conference. At number 8 on the list is Illinois. Illinois has been a mess as a program in the last couple of years, not just with off-the-field incidences, but also with the unfortunate injuries that many of their players have suffered. Illinois vastly underperformed expectations last year, but that was mainly due to the fact that this team could just not catch any breaks with their players, as Illinois went on to go 15-19 overall and 5-13 in conference play. This group will be returning 3 starters to a team that finished last year ranked 151st in the RPI. The guy to really look out for here is going to be senior swingman Malcolm Hill, who averaged over 18 points per game last year. And another player that we're really excited for is going to be Mike Thorne Jr., who was the transfer that came over from Charlotte a couple years back. After getting off to a strong start last year, Mike Thorne Jr. went off with a season-ending injury after averaging over 13 points and 8 rebounds per game. Thorne has lost a lot of weight in the offseason, and he's expected to be one of the better big men in the Big Ten this year. Illinois' roster has the kind of firepower where they can hang with most teams in the Big Ten just offensively, but it's going to be up to this squad on the defensive side of the ball to show improvement if they're going to really make a significant movement up in the conference standings. At number 7 on the list is the Maryland Terrapins. Maryland had tremendous success last year, going 27-9 overall and 12-6 in the Big Ten, but unfortunately for this group, they only returned 1 starter. But I guess the positive news for Maryland is they are returning at least 1 starter, considering the fact that they nearly lost all their 5 starters from this past year. Starters not returning for Maryland include talented guys like Rashid Suleiman, Jake Lehman, Robert Carter Jr., and Diamond Stone. Maryland will be hitching their ride to star point guard Melo Trimble, who had a really solid sophomore campaign, averaging nearly 15 points per game and 5 assists. Maryland remains this high in the conference standings even with all of these losses, given the fact that this squad has been able to reload and still boast some pretty solid depth for a Big Ten team. Other starters that we're looking at are going to be Dion Wiley, Justin Jackson, L.J. Gill, and DeMonte Dodd. Trimble is the unquestioned star of this team, and he's really supposed to put together an amazing junior campaign as he goes on to perhaps even win the Conference Player of the Year award. Maryland's success is really going to hinge on how well Trimble plays, not just in scoring the ball, but also distributing on the offensive side of the ball. Maryland has solid depth on the perimeter, but there is question marks with the front line. The Terps do have guys like Dodd and Gill who have some experience, which should help somewhat, but Maryland is just not going to be the same force in the paint that they were last year. At number 6 on the list, we have the Ohio State Buckeyes. Ohio State disappointed largely last year, going 21-14 overall against a fairly easy schedule compared to most Big Ten teams, and then going 11-7 in conference, which put them in 7th place in the conference. Ohio State does return all 5 starters to a squad that finished 78th last year in the RPI rankings. Ohio State continues to be a very young team, but this squad does have more experience than last year's group. We expect good things this year out of guys like Jaquan Lyle, Mark Loving, Keita Bates-Diop, and Jay Sean Tate, as well as Cam Williams, who's really underperformed in his career as a Buckeye after coming in as a highly touted recruit. Head coach Mata really likes the group he has this year, and I'm sure he's happy that this squad is going to have a lot more continuity coming into the season than last year's squad had. The Buckeyes should be able to return to the NCAA tournament, but they can't afford to suffer 5 losses before Christmas like they did last year. At number 5, we have Michigan. Michigan was able to slide into the NCAA tournament last year, going 23-13 overall, as well as 10-8 in the Big Ten. This squad returns all 5 starters to a team that finished 58th in the RPI last year. Michigan returns a host of veteran players like Derek Walton Jr., Zach Irving, Duncan Robinson, Muhammad Ali Abdur-Rahman, as well as big man Mark McDonnell. Michigan won't return Karis LeVert, who was Mr. Do-It-All for this squad in recent years. Michigan might be a little light on depth compared to most Big Ten teams, but this squad does have a lot of veteran leadership that has been around and has had experience in not just tight games but also tournament experience, and that should help Michigan stay really relevant in the Big Ten and get them back to the NCAA tournament. At number 4 on the list is the Michigan State Spartans. Michigan State had another very strong campaign last year, going 29-6 overall, as well as 13-5 in the Big Ten, but this squad does return just 2 starters to a team that finished 12th in the RPI at the end of last year. Michigan State will definitely miss guys like Bryn Forbes, Denzel Valentine, Matt Costello, Deontay Davis, as well as some other guys that have graduated or moved on to the NBA. Michigan State is also dealing with some injury concerns coming into the year, which could affect where they ultimately end up. Some of the guys to look out for on this team are going to be guys like Tum Tum Narin, Eron Harris, Joshua Langford, and Miles Bridges, who is a really highly touted freshman, as well as Joshua Langford. Michigan State has a really young team, and going into a really tough non-conference schedule, this could be a concern for the Spartans early on in the year, but we expect this group to really progress as a unit as the year goes on, and Michigan State does return some veteran pieces that should help the transition. Expect Michigan State to be a strong factor again in the Big Ten Conference by season's end. At number 3, we have the Indiana Hoosiers. It's crazy to think that head coach Crean was actually on the hot seat heading into last year, but Indiana was able to impress, going 27-8 overall, as well as 15-3 in the Big Ten, which got them the Big Ten regular season title. Indiana will return 3 starters to a team that lost in the Sweet 16 last year. Obviously, losing starters like Yogi Ferrell and Troy Williams will hurt, but Indiana does return a lot of other guys as well as some interesting prospects that should make this team be a threat to win and repeat as the regular season Big Ten champions. Projected starters for this group include Robert Johnson, James Blackman Jr., Colin Hartman, Og Anunoby, and Thomas Bryant. This is one of the deepest teams Tom Crean has ever had in Indiana, and that depth is really going to be a game changer as Indiana tries to repeat as the Big Ten regular season champions. Tom Crean has said the return from last year's players as well as the incoming recruits has gone really well, and that's a great sign for this squad heading into the year. At number 2 on the list, we have the Purdue Boilermakers. Purdue is a team that seems to get consistently overlooked in the Big Ten every year, but I'm not sure that's the case this year, as Purdue is expected to be a top 10 team and finish right at the top of the Big Ten standings. Purdue had a lot of success last year, going 26-9 overall, 12-6 in conference play, and this group returns 3 starters to a squad that finished last year ranked 17th in the RPI. Purdue does lose some key players with A.J. Hammonds and Raphael Davis moving on. Purdue remains strong with projected starters like P.J. Thompson, Dakota Mathias, Vincent Edwards, Caleb Swanigan, and Isaac Haas, and Purdue forms one of the most fearsome and talented front courts, not just in the Big Ten, but in the country as a whole. Not only does Purdue have really strong front court play, but they also have shooters that should be able to stretch the defense and really give Purdue a lot of room to work in the paint with their talented big guys, and that's really going to be a difference maker for the Boilermakers this year. And coming in at number 1 on our list is going to be the Wisconsin Badgers. Wisconsin is coming off another solid campaign, going 22-13 overall, 12-16 in conference, and finishing last year ranked 36 in the RPI. But last year's Wisconsin team really gained a lot of steam in Big Ten play after having some not so great results back in the non-conference. But having 5 starters back for Wisconsin should really help the Badgers as they transition into this year, and we expect the Badgers to have more success early on this season than they had last year. Wisconsin pretty much returns everyone of note from last year's squad, and their projected starters right now are going to be Bronson Koenig, Zach Showalter, Nigel Hayes, Vito Brown, and Ethan Happ. And the guy to really look out for this year is going to be small forward Nigel Hayes, who's really seemed like he's been playing at Wisconsin forever, but this past year he averaged nearly 16 points per game, 6 rebounds and 3 assists, and he really has shown the ability to play nearly the entire 40 minutes for Wisconsin, and his veteran leadership on the court is just going to be really important to this squad having a ton of success. This Wisconsin team has had a ton of success with the current senior class going to 2 Final Fours and a Sweet 16, and that kind of postseason experience should really translate over for the Badgers this season. Look for Wisconsin to not only start the season strong, but carry that through conference play, as they have some of the better depth in the conference, as well as just the intangibles, as well as both backcourt and frontcourt strength in their starting lineup. Wisconsin is the complete package and should be able to win the Big Ten regular season title by season's end. Alright guys, so this has been our Big Ten standings projections and team previews for coming into the 2016-2017 season. It's going to be a really exciting year in the Big Ten, and just as to kind of finish off this video, we're going to be talking about some players to look out as potential all-conference players. The guys to look out for the potential all-conference team include Nigel Hayes from Wisconsin, Malcolm Hill from Illinois, Thomas Bryant from Indiana, Peter Jauch from Iowa, and Melo Trimble from Maryland. This is going to be a really great year in the Big Ten, and we're really looking forward to seeing how things shake out in this conference. And if you want more of these conference preview videos in the coming days as we head closer to the actual start of the season, then you can subscribe. And also, I'm going to be releasing daily college basketball pick videos once the season starts, and if you're interested in getting those, you can also get those videos sent to your feed or however you have your notifications set up to get those particular videos. Thanks again for watching, and subscribe for more content.